Go.
All right, welcome to today's edition of Firefighting Fridays. I'm Jeff Diederich with Strategic Fire Training, and tonight, as usual, we have Jeff Shupe, Jerry Knapp, and we also have John Mateer and Chad Gruver here to round it out. Tonight, we're going to get specific with the company officer's responsibility with the engine. Not necessarily have to be sworn in as an officer. If you happen to be acting up that day, here's a heads up on this quick podcast. We're going to run down a few things that Jeff has put together over the years. And then the rest of us are going to kind of pull it apart a little bit, unpack it, and talk about it. So, Jeff, how do you want to start tonight?
Well, does everybody see the slide up here?
Yeah, we got
that, right? Okay. The company officer's responsibility as a leader. Again, we're referring to the guy who's going to be in charge of an engine company. All right. So, one of the slides that I put up in one of my presentations is that everyone from the lowest ranking probationary firefighter to the chief of the department needs to know how an engine company is supposed to operate at a fire. And whether you're first due, second due, third due, or whatever, there's a certain amount of discipline involved with getting that to be accomplished at a fire. And that's where we get into the things about how an engine is set up, the organization of an engine. We've all heard it throughout the years about the different positions of an engine. We have the driver or the engineer, we have the officer or acting officer, we have the nozzle firefighter. And if we have a 3-member company, if we have a 4-member company, then we've got a backup firefighter. And each one of those positions needs to have an assignment which comes from the company officer. And that's the whole thing about, you have these different players. They may have different jobs to take care of, but it's all operating as one at one engine company and so forth. So I'll move this slide. I'm going to move the slide on here first. Okay. If you're an acting officer or an officer on an engine, first thing, you're responsible for your company. This is without question. Again, this is a discipline thing. This is an authoritarian thing. This is something that when you are sitting in that right front seat, everything that engine does is your responsibility. If there's a problem with your engine, generally it should be that position that gets the go-to or the go-to position for whatever problems your company might have. And if the command officer has an assignment for your company and you don't have one, that command officer should be talking to you. Not your firefighters, not your pump operator, but to you, because you're the one who's responsible for what your company does at the scene of a fire. The other thing is, when it comes to making decisions, this is the thing about, time in a job, time in the business, your type of personality, your convictions, your confidence, your background, and so forth comes into play. You're the one responsible for making decisions, and sometimes you got to make a tough decision. Look what's happening with the computer and all these programs out there about guys, who want to come up with their own ideas or opinions about what they think an engine should operate like on a fire ground. Well, number one, as we said before in our group, I think I can speak for all of us on this one. Our number one thing is that firefighting is circumstantial. Number two, it's geographical. Number three, it's local. So when we're looking at decision making, you have to look at what you have to deal with, whether you have 3 firefighters or 4 firefighters or 5 on your engine, where you're from, what are your environmental conditions, what are your fire conditions, what's the building, all this stuff. But that decision, how your engine operates, should come from that company officer or the acting officer and so forth. So anybody want to chime in here?
Yeah, let's keep it going to the.
Okay.
You're on a roll, Jeff. So
okay, good.
Here's the next bullet point. You are responsible for people's lives.
Yeah, that's absolutely your first step up the ladder. And I won't mention his name, but I remember this gentleman years ago, was saying that it's not the 5th bugle you get that's the heaviest bugle. It's the first bugle you get, because that's the one where you now become responsible for people's lives and people's property. The most important people's lives is your crew first, and making sure that you're responsible for them and so forth. And I thought that was a great thing to, to point out, because a lot of people, when they get that promotion, and we've seen it in all departments. I don't care what department you're from, how big you are, how small you are, whatever. We see people that, they get promoted up that first rung of the ladder and they're not ready for it, for whatever reason. And to have that statement, you're automatically responsible for people's lives. Some people just, it's one of those hard things that you have to accept with the position. So, all right, I'm going to move it on here. When you're in charge of a company or a crew at a working incident, this is the whole thing about having a plan, whether it's an SOP, SOG, I don't care what you call it. Okay. We have people splitting hairs. Oh, I want to call it this. I want to call it that. Look, I don't give a damn. Okay. But have a plan that your people know. If you're the first new engine, you're generally going to go on fire attack. If you're the second new engine, generally your job is back up the first line, make sure the water supply's patent. And then when there's a need for a second line, that second engine crew should be the ones that we should count on to take care of that. So these are things like having a plan, and that company officer making sure that whether you're first, second, or third due or whatever you're arriving, that you're working according to the attack plan. So this third thing down here, I'm sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to interrupt you there. You early on, you mentioned the 4 positions in the engine, and along with having a plan, it works really well as a company officer if everybody in the engine understands what is the first 3 things you're going to do at smoke shown at a single story or 2-story single family residence. Shouldn't be a whole lot of discussion on what needs to be done, right? I mean, and then even further than that, if you're practiced, if you have a single story commercial on fire, if you have an alarm at a multiple story building, if it's a commercial alarm at an auto dealership, if it's your company officer can start thinking more about the specifics of the incident if everybody in the engine knows what the first couple things that they're going to do at that specific of alarm is. And that comes down to the culture of the fire department, but it also comes down to the leadership of the company officer. There shouldn't be any guessing like, hey, you're working for Chad tonight. This is how Chad handles, smoke in the building at an apartment building. Everybody should know that if they're working for John Mateer at 11 and they're going to their second or third fire that week, John has a way of doing things. And on from there. Does that make sense?
Sure. Absolutely.
So I just wanted to try and make the point that as a company officer, your job can get a lot, I don't want to say easier, but it can get, I guess, better decision making if you're not concerned with looking over your shoulder and saying, hey, grab the 1 3/4 line, stretch out 200 feet. If that's just a known tactic, like, hey, we got smoke coming from my house, the nozzle man's going to get to the back and get the working length off, and that's just how it should be. Go ahead, Chad, you had something?
Jeff, what I was going to say is it kind of goes back to, you're responsible for people's lives. Well, yeah, you are responsible for your crew's life. And I think one of the first things you can do is that you have to train with your crew. If you don't have, I'm a new officer, it's still less than a year, and I have a very young crew. My whole goal is to get them prepared for anything that we come across. And that way they do know how I operate and they do know what my playbook is. But being on the fire ground is not the first time I need to talk to them about my playbook. So you have to be responsible enough to show your firefighters what you want them, how we're going to do this as a team. But, when I think I'm responsible for people's lives, and Shupe, you're right, that first bugle is the heaviest, because that's my biggest fear is that I don't have these guys ready to go in and do their job. And, if you take it seriously, you can make it fun, but, I think the most responsible thing I can do is make sure there's no questions, that I can have most of the questions answered before we get to the incident. And I think
Right.
that's kind of what you were getting at, Jeff.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And that leads into your next bullet point there. Do not let your firefighters freelance on the fire ground.
No, especially when you're on an engine. The engine has to operate as a team. And if your guys are stepping off the engine with hooks and axes in their hands, running around, breaking out windows, they're not there to take care of the problem then. They're actually creating a bigger problem. If the first due engine would be expected to pull an attack hose line and they're not doing that, well, then who does? And by that time that attack line gets pulled, and by who, that fire could have tremendous headway and destroy the building, kill people, or whatever the case may be. And it's all because the engine didn't do what it was supposed to do. They were, as the thing says, freelancing on the fire ground. And there was an old phrase years ago. What the heck was, I forget how it was stated, but it said, freelance firefighting leads to chaos, and chaos leads to so and so, and so forth like that. So that's the thing, understand that when you're on an engine, you have to operate as an engine. And that's the other thing about, whether you're a volunteer fire department that does not have companies. They got the apparatus, but you don't have that company concept. So if a guy responds from home to the firehouse, gets his gear on, this fire, he jumps onto an engine. Next fire he jumps onto is a truck. And then he's back. And what did he do? Well, you just don't assign yourself. And that's where the person who sits in that right front seat has got to take control of that crew. And if it's an engine crew, make them operate as an engine. Because if they don't get the water going and they're supposed to, like we said, the fire can just, have a devastating impact. So,
Yeah.
okay.
All right. Want to run on to the next slide? We hit that company concept already.
Yeah, we have. Okay. Personnel responsibilities. Let me go back here. Foster teamwork and cooperation. And that's something, once again, we talk about it the first thing when we go out, right? The first thing we do is get the people together for an introduction, or like when we're doing hands-on, and we talk about teamwork. We want everybody to get it in their mind to work together as a team. And again, here the company officer needs to be the guy who's going to get that mindset across to his crew or to his company. If you're a lieutenant and you have a captain in charge of the company, you would want the captain to have that type of mentality where he's telling his lieutenants to make sure the firefighters in the company operate together as team members. And if you have different positions like engineer or driver, nozzle, backup, that everyone needs to know those positions and function in those positions, be able to function in those positions and so forth. So, sounds good?
Yeah, I like it.
Okay. Next one is to assist with individual and team development. And again, that's a company officer's job right there, to know his people. I remember working with a few older officers in the past. I mean, they were older. That's true. There's nothing young about those guys at all back then. And that was the one thing. They knew their people, and they made sure that they were going to be part of the team and so forth. Because you've heard me talk about, a couple of bosses I had, like working on the God Squad. If you don't cut it, that's it, son. You're going to be out of here, or something like that, because it was
Right.
all about teamwork. Everyone was taught to depend on each other and get the job done and so forth. So,
And can even go a little bit further if you're just in the firehouse, understanding who's working with you, and knowing that the chatterbox of the group, don't expect him to shut up all day because he's going to talk all day. The guy that's out to play the practical jokes, don't expect him to change his stripes either. There is going to be, either firecrackers or some other type of stuff going on all day long. Yeah.
Who would that?
Who would that be? Right.
Who would that refer to?
John. But knowing your personalities that are working with you is a big part of it.
Yeah.
As much as it is on the fire ground, you got to know who that go-getter is. You got to know who the guy that's looking at the drop account and looking at his days that are numbered. How do you get all these people to work as a team? You got to let them shine a little bit and show the group what they can do. But you still have to be the leader of the group, which can be difficult when you have varying types of personalities in the firehouse. So that teamwork is not just at the fire. It starts in the firehouse.
Yep, absolutely. And that's another thing that firehouse life is all about, right, John?
Absolutely.
The different personalities, but again, when the box comes in, we all come together. So,
Yeah.
all right. The other thing is, the boss should be a positive role model, and again, as we talked earlier, not everybody is that, but we would like to see a boss, an officer, be the role model, because like I said earlier, when things come push to shove or decisions have to be made and so forth, and you're looking at that person, what kind of a person do you want to be looking at for that decision?
And I think that can reflect back on having time on the job
Yeah.
or just time on the earth.
But
I mean, you imagine who you were when you were 30 or 20 or 10 years old. I mean, your mindset's completely different, and your life experience reflects on everything. It's easier to be a role model when you have some time in the job.
I think everyone in our group agrees that firefighting is supposed to be a time-honored profession. And that's that knowledge and that experience that you put together over your career. And again, that's something that can never be taken away from you.
Yeah.
It should not be challenged, especially when you've paid your dues and so forth. So here's another one. This is one that's always interesting. When someone takes that first step up the ladder and they're expected to train their people. Again, it comes down to what you just said about time in the business, knowledge, experience, and things like that. What does that new officer bring to the company or the crew? And how does the crew look at that officer? Again, is it a positive role model that they're looking at? Well, when it comes time to instructing or training the members of the crew, if the guy doesn't have the background or he doesn't have the knowledge or the experience, that puts that officer in a tough position, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, certainly does.
Yeah. So, and maybe here's that thing about the maybe. If you have a younger officer, the guy could have 10, 15 years in the job. He gets promoted. He goes to an older company. But the guys are all older, more experienced. They know their job well. And here's this guy. You think if he was knowing how to be diplomatic with these people, he would say, "Hey guys, show me about this. Show me what you guys are doing. What you guys do.
Yeah.
Be flat out honest with the people about your position." So
Yeah, let them bring it out. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. What do you think, Jer?
On mute here. Yeah, I think the leader's got to have a clear mission and display that properly and be the role model and make it clear so you get that teamwork. Make the goal clear. What are we trying to do here? And I think your thought about fighting fires with the engine company. One of the things we've seen around here is a lot of volunteer companies are buying these $1 zillion quints. So the idea is, we can pull a hose line or we can be a ladder, but what are you when you pull up? Somebody needs to say, hey, we're really the engine with a ladder on top, or we're the ladder with the hose, but we're not pulling that today. So making clear, what your mission is, I think is the key. One of the keys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
The curse of the quint.
Yeah.
It's not going anywhere.
No, it's not.
All right.
Okay.
Personal responsibilities of the engine company officer.
Yeah. Reviewing performance. And I think it goes right back to what we were just talking about. It's just a continuation of that, where who is the guy who's critiquing the company members? How
Yeah.
do they look at him? You know, again, if this officer is not on the same page, well, then he may have a rough time communicating with his people, or his people might not believe in him. But if he is following the plan, he's trained his people, he's treating his people with the respect and letting them have their, what would you say, leash or whatever, you know, I think things would be a lot better, for that boss in that regards, especially when comes time to reviewing performance and so forth. So I recall a fire one time where an officer got everybody in the kitchen, and he just didn't have the shall we say, the personality, you know, to stand in front of an older, experienced crew and grade them out. And it was a pretty extreme situation with exposures involved and things like that, and it kind of showed. And it was one of those things where the guy lost a lot of points that day, you know. So, but that's what happens.
Yeah. You gotta, as an officer, you have to take responsibility for, like you
Yeah.
said, you're responsible for what happens on that crew. You can't come home and
Yeah.
blame the other guys on the engine.
Yeah.
I think one of the things you can do to get good performance is set the objectives early on. I worked for the Army forever, and for all their faults, we had a civilian performance evaluation standard, and your boss would sit down with you on your anniversary date, and he would say, "Okay, here's what I want you to accomplish this year. Do you think you can do that?" And you go, "Yes, sir, no, sir. Yeah, I can do 3, but I may have some trouble with 4, bullet 4, that kind of thing." So we knew up front what we were supposed to do. And then at 6 months, I remember I was working for a captain at the time, and he came in and he said, "Come on, I got to counsel you." I'm like, "What did I do wrong?" He goes, "You didn't do anything wrong. I'm just going to show you where you are in your annual performance appraisal. So you got another 6 months to fix up all your screw ups, you know?" And then at the end of the year, we'd sit down and we went, "Okay, and in January 1st, you said you were going to do this. Yeah, you did that. You did that. You didn't do so good on this one." So setting that goal early, and like Jeff says, that teamwork, and where does the first hose line go, and all those kind of things need to be squared away well in advance, and then the rest of it kind of is pretty easy, or makes it
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Did we go over this next one? Discipline?
Not yet.
Okay. So another job of the company officer, the acting officer, is to make sure the crew members do what they're supposed to do. Again, you can have SOPs, but if you don't follow them, especially in those fires where an SOP is going to start you off on the right foot and you don't follow it for whatever reason, well, then you have a discipline issue. Or like we referred to earlier when we said guys are jumping off engines with hooks and axes in their hands and they want to do vent work and truck work rather than engine work. Well, that's a discipline issue right there. You've lost control of your crew. And again, that thing about company concept and your mission statement of your engine and what you expect the guys to do. Well, that's all part of discipline, having the guys do what they're supposed to do, and the officer making sure they do it. So
Yeah.
communicate. All right. Would you say that was pretty much self-explanatory, or do we need to go into this one?
Yeah, you could probably communicate all day about communication. So
Yeah,
why don't we just
exactly.
move on.
Yeah. I'll tell you, before we do move on, you know what? When we're going out, we're doing hands-on. Whether we just came back from Denver for Mile High Conference, we've been in Indianapolis recently, and every other place we've gone to. Notice the hand signals. We're like this. I see a lot of people doing this for water and things like that, and yet at the end of the day, because we do an 8-hour class, and we do it, especially like when we're charging the lines or when we're shutting the lines down. This means all lines are shut down. This one, you point to the hose line, you go like this, shut this hose line down. It's interesting to see many times a lot of the students pick up on that too. I've seen that. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
They're just picking up on it because they see us. And then when we say, those are your hand signals, and that's a backup communication. You may see a guy a quarter mile away, but you can't hear him. So what do? Use your hand signals and things like that. Your radio, you may or may not have a working radio with you, but this is all the whole thing about the communication systems on the fire ground and so forth. So, okay, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Hey,
Yeah.
Shupe,
Yeah,
communication, talking about the class, we just, like you said, we just got back from Denver. A lot of the students are shocked that you can communicate and we can run our huge scenarios and we do it without radios.
yes, yeah,
Because I think communications, if you get on the radio and you start talking too much, it hurts you.
absolutely. That's what we say when everybody becomes radioactive. Nobody can hear anybody. But yeah, that is true. And you know what? Look at the different types of communications we're employing when we run a scenario. We're running face to face. We're running visual. Like when I'm running around finding the crews, where they're at, what they're doing. That's enhancing accountability. So all those different ways of communicating and so forth. And it just, it is something, like when we do say that, I'm glad you brought that up, Chad. We don't use walkie talkies, but we still got control of 40 people working on hose lines throughout a building. So
It's quite an accomplishment for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So,
And really it breaks down to a span of control. If Jeff, you're the IC, and then we're coaching the groups to get the tactical objectives done. But, we understand what you want and we communicate that to the crews, and then they go get it done. So it's the bare bones, span of control. It just break it down and it works.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Know what to look for in your communication system. So, all right. Okay, next up, motivation. Okay. Company officer needs to motivate. Sometimes motivation is very simple. I remember an old thing years ago, the P's together, praise in public, but criticize in private. Jer, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, that's just a real old, little saying there, but it's really, really true, man.
Yeah. Yep. So.
I thought you were going to go with the other P's where, piss poor planning creates piss poor performance, but
no.
like, as far as motivating goes,
right.
Got to have a plan.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's always something to see an officer complimenting their people and praising their people and so forth, especially after a tough job. Yeah, that just goes for miles. It really does. So
Yeah.
Administrative responsibilities. Of course, we want the boss to support the goals of the organization and so forth. Sometimes that's, something that needs to be reinforced, as we know. And we'll leave that one there. To plan work assignments. This is one of those interesting things. I think most departments have it, but I got to tell you, as we go around the country and we see the different work schedules, the different starting times for departments and things like that, you wonder about their work assignments and things like that. For me and John, our thing, when I was on the job, you had your roll call, and one of the things that I saw in our fire department, during our crazy time, what we call the battle years, the war years, whatever you want to call it, we didn't have roll call because a lot of guys were still in bed, when shift change actually took place from a time standpoint. These guys would be, getting their brains beat out every night. You didn't expect them to get up out of bed and after a couple of minutes of sleep and stay on roll call. So when we got away from that, we didn't get away from fires, but we got away from that heavy workload and so forth. And the one chief of the department said, we're going to go back to roll calls. We had them in the kitchen in a lot of firehouses. And then a couple of bosses throughout the city said, no, let's have the roll calls out on the apparatus floor. Between the companies, like if you got an engine, a ladder, or an engine and a squad in the same firehouse, squad guys are here, engine guys are here, or engine guys are by their apparatus and the truck guys are by the truck. And that's when roll call took place. You had you had a formal exchange between the shifts. And then of course, work assignments. What are we doing? Okay, what do we got to do? Okay, 10 o'clock we'll be expected to be doing this. We're going to be down meeting with an FPO, for something or whatever, things like that. And that work assignment would set your tone for the rest of the morning. Because, you got to take care of the apparatus, you got to take care of the firehouse and whatever you had to do to get ready for that appointment that you had, out there in the field and so forth. So that's an officer's responsibility to make sure his people are ready for that. Otherwise, what's going to happen? You're going to hear over the loudspeaker, "Hey, everybody in the engine, we're going." And you're like, "What the hell's this?" It's like, "Oh, okay." But when you got your guys in those formal meetings, like the roll calls, this is where this stuff is passed along and so forth.
Jeff, I know we've talked about this before, but when we had the roll call on the apparatus floor, we all checked the rig together. We all checked our masks together. We all put our gear on together. We talked about our personal lives and what was going on. We also talked about what our assignments were for the day. Yeah. And a lot of people hated it being out there. I enjoyed it.
I thought it was the best thing too.
Yeah, that goes back to the discipline, right? We knew it. We had an 8:30 start time and roll call was at 8:25. We showed up 5 minutes before our shift started and didn't even get paid for it. Can you believe that?
Hard to believe.
And
some guys showed up way before that.
Yeah, but we put our gear on and we knew where we were for the day. We were all set.
Yeah.
A lot of guys, maybe they didn't appreciate it then, but I think if you look at how we do it now, like you said, at the kitchen table, and 7 of the 8 guys sit there with their feet on the table and drinking coffee and never get their gear on the rig. Yeah. So
one guy's in a corner reading the newspaper,
the other
not
guy's
paying
checking his job
attention.
account.
How many times? Yeah. Well, how many times did you hear the officer say, "Shut the TV off"? Because the TV's always blaring away. Because you want them to hear this stuff. So.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll move past this one. And that one. And that one. Okay. So, part of your fireground responsibility, once again, we talked about this, to maintain crew concept and accountability. Don't let your guys freelance. And I think we did mention SOPs, SOGs, operate accordingly. You're an engine, operate as an engine. So, and again, when it comes to your position as a company officer, your guys and their safety, that's top of the priority list. Maintain communications. So general responsibilities, your assigned mission, whether you're first due, second due, third due engine, or whatever the case may be, or else if your engine is arriving later in the order and the incident commander says, "Hey, you guys, you're going to relieve engine so-and-so." Okay. So, and let's see what else we got here. So pretty much self-explanatory what we want from our officer. Turn the goals into the action, make sure that the guys are meeting their requirements and so forth. What services are delivered by, let's just say, engine companies? Okay. What resources are provided by the community to make sure efficient delivery of services are out there, and so forth. So it's interesting because if you take a look at the Rust Belt, so many of the fire departments used to be a lot bigger than what they are now. For example, one time we had over 1,300 guys on a job, and what's it down to now, John?
About 750.
Yeah. Jesus God, that's huge. And look at all the companies that have been taken out of service over time.
We're down about 10 companies since I got on, and that was down way down from when you were on.
Right. Yeah, it's the same story in Detroit and Buffalo and most other Rust Belt cities, from that period, when industry was working, the jobs were there, the tax dollars came in to fund the fire service and so forth. And it's all changed over time. So when it comes to this question, what resources are provided by the community to assure efficient delivery of services, it's interesting. So when you had 42 engines in the street at one time and you're down to 23 now, you wonder, oh my gosh, how do you do it? And we've picked up all these runs like EMS runs or first responder runs, whatever you want to call them. And that's something that impacts your availability of your fire companies.
Yeah.
So it's a huge thing, so forth. So, but we'll figure it out, right? We're firefighters. So,
Yep, we typically do.
yeah. So this is interesting, as is this program, by the way, is one that I used to put on with another officer down at the State Fire Academy for several years. So this is where this material comes from. But just take a look at this little graphic right here. You can have the same amount of money going into two fire departments, which you think might provide equal services, but no, that's not the same. Fire departments are different. Fire departments are made up of people. We're all different. Despite what you want to believe, we're all different. We all have different philosophies in how we want to provide our services to our communities. We all have different cultures within our fire departments. We have all these different expectations and so forth. It's like the fire departments that run with let's just say, 1.5-inch hose out there versus 1.75-inch hose, and 1.75-inch versus the 2-inch and 2.5 and things like that and so forth. So how do you get the job done? So what processes need to be in place in order to assure efficient service delivery? The community provides income to the local governments. And in many cases, those people who are paying taxes to their local governments expect that money for their fire department to be funded. And it's interesting. I remember reading something years ago. It was like one of those governmental notifications of all the city services in cities across the country. Guess which city service was the most accepted and the most revered in those communities?
Yeah, fire rescue for sure.
Exactly, and so forth. So you would expect the bulk of those tax dollars to go to the fire department, and that's not the way it is. Really.
Be nice.
So yeah, it would be, but unfortunately, as we've seen over the years, we've seen people climb the ladder and wanting to be holding on to their positions. So what do they want to do? They want to look good at City Hall. And we say we could work by cutting the staffing on the fire companies, or we could cut a couple more fire companies, or we could go with the Quinn concept, as you guys mentioned earlier before. Yeah, we'll take out a ladder company and an engine company, replace it with this thing. It's like, well, that's not a service. That's a cutback is what it is. Things like that. So,
yeah.
So, but if the guys are not standing up to it, why?
Jeff, money drives the train. And I think one of the important things for a leader, one is he or she needs to be able to justify, reasonable requests, especially for funding. The second thing is that, especially in these smaller communities, that you need to look at your ISO rating. For example, it's 25 years ago now, we justified, was a $500,000 ladder truck at that time. We justified a ladder truck by saying there would be a small increase in taxes to pay for it, but each homeowner would get a substantial, because it would raise our ISO rating, would improve our ISO rating.
Yeah.
Each homeowner would substantially save on their fire insurance premium. And what was really interesting is we looked at the businesses and the industrial fire insurance by improving our ISO rating one notch. those folks, those industrial and commercial folks, save thousands of dollars each year in their fire insurance. So one, again, just to kind of go back, a leader's got to be able to justify based on sound fire protection principles. And then you need to look at that ISO versus your cost of apparatus. And if you can say, hey, if we spend $500,000 on this, we can save everybody, millions of dollars through the community by raising our ISO rating. We're not going to get away from it. Money drives a train. Then be able to go and just say, oh, I need a new ladder truck. Okay, great. It's an emotional plea, but you got to put numbers to it. You got to put dollars and cents on it.
Yeah. Hey, do you see, and this is for all you guys, do you see any departments out there or the NFPA standards for automotive fire apparatus? Are they saying that we should be rolling over our apparatus every so many years? Every 15 years, get rid of them, or every 20 years, get rid of them and replace them and stuff like that? Or is that in print now? Are we seeing that, or is that just a recommendation?
I don't know if it's in print. I know that we take ours out of frontline service every 10 years.
Wow.
Sorry, John.
Yeah, we don't quite follow that same number.
Right. Jerry?
I've heard rumors about it. I can't tell you for sure. I don't know for sure, Jeff.
Yeah. Okay. Because I know those were the things that, like, I guess it's a capital improvement when you're buying a fire truck for your community. It's something you expect to hold on to for a number of years. And by the way, that was the old fire service. And I'm talking about, when I was just a little kid hanging around the firehouses back then. But, firemen, they took pride in their apparatus, and you just saw them on those apparatus all the time, making sure that they were maintained and so forth, because they knew they were going to have them for a long time, for a long number of years. Heck, where I grew up, Canton, Ohio had 3 Aaron's Foxes with the big chrome ball out front, that front mount pump and so forth. Those were 1937 models, and they kept them, God, I want to say into the 70s or 80s. I mean, in reserve, not front line, but nevertheless, those things, they were beasts, man. When those guys were pumping, they were really, tremendous to watch, but they hung on that long. So okay, I just didn't know that, because when you take a look at this graph here, or this graphic here about the inputs and what we take the money in for, and then the services that we provide with the most important thing, which is our personnel. Those 3 things right there, by the way, where it says under inputs, personnel, apparatus, and equipment, those are the 3 resources that the fire service has to work with. And I remember that being posted years ago in an old National Fire Academy. I think it was one of the MICTO classes. They talked about those 3 resource categories. That's what we have to work with on the fire ground. So right there, you see it right there. So of course, the other stuff, facilities, tools, and the other thing, time. Well, the output, what do we do with it? How do we provide those services and so forth? So what I also find interesting is some parts of the country, like where we just came from, what is that? Aurora is made up of what did they say? 350 square miles? That's tremendous.
A lot of square mileage.
Yeah,
Jeff, if I could, this graphic that people that are listening may not see it, that the center bubble shows, it says processes, and on one side is input, the other side is outputs, and the things you listed there. I think for this discussion here with the company officer, the center of the graphic is where the company officer is. He or she is doing the supervising, problem solving, training, communication up and down the line, planning for not only what's in your first due, but also planning what's going on that day, that month, that year, maintenance on the vehicle, what's going on with the engine, physical fitness, making sure that there's time in the day for the crews to get to that. And then administrative services, of course. I mean, you could be a good officer in the fire ground, but you could be a terrible manager in the office. And if that's the case, it's going to slow you down and make you not like your job very much. So you got to get good at some of those administrative services, as tedious and, you know, not as fun as we would like them to be. But just to kind of bring that back into where the company officer plays in this slide here is all the inputs, all the resources come into the firehouse. If the company officers are not interested in doing a good job at all of those things, then, you know, the fire suppression, the EMS, the public education, community service as a whole just kind of goes downhill from there if the frontline officers aren't interested in doing that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What's that thing that we say? It doesn't take a lot to be good. Right, John?
That's right. You said that about your crew out there in Denver.
We appreciated that one. You
So
missed
the
that, Jeff.
students.
What's that?
I told Diederich that he missed that part of it.
That's why I left early, you know, so you guys can get your accolades.
So Jerry, for since you couldn't make it there with us, we had a great class in Denver. It was awesome. I think we even got more efficient than we normally are. And
Maybe.
It went really well. And at the end, Shupe, not thinking about it and not meaning any disgrace by it, said, guys, as you can tell, it doesn't take a lot to be good. And he looked directly at John and I.
I just wanted to go ahead.
Half the students started laughing, and Jeff was like, "What? What happened?" And Chad,
All I wanted.
he just
all I
throws something
wanted
in the bus.
No, I didn't. I was just looking for a little affirmation. That's
not
all.
how it was seen by 20 of those 40 students.
I heard it was all because Jeff got politically incorrect and just let it fly. That's
yeah.
We got the real Jeff Shupe out. That was the key to success.
It was a blast. We had a great time.
You came out from behind the curtain. Hey, go back to that one slide. I think there's
Yeah.
a couple important points for new officers here. The
Yeah.
dollar sign in the bottom left, I know as firefighters, we don't want to deal with that, but you know, you're the boss of an engine company. You do a good job at a one-room fire, and who cares? But you ought to go back to the firehouse and say, hey, we just saved a $750,000 house or $200,000 house, or whatever it is, you know. So the bosses, you know, in City Hall, they understand that, you know. They don't care that, you know, we did a good job and we think we did a great job. And when we did, we care about how much did you save? Oh yeah, Mr. Town Supervisor, that house is still on the tax rolls because of what we did. Oh, and he's thinking cha-ching, you know, dollar signs. So I think Jeff Diederich brought up some good points about the officer. You know, you may have the greatest fireman and now he's a lieutenant, and this poor guy now has got to fill out paperwork. Maybe he doesn't want to. Maybe he's never been trained how to do it, you know. So the department owes,
Right.
you know, the department owes some kind of standard training program for that guy to make sure he succeeds. You know, we've been kind of, I don't want to say beating on the company officer, but that guy needs to be nurtured and grown and trained as well to do a good job for the rest of his guys.
Jerry, you are right on. You are absolutely right on. And this is one of the things we talk about. Yeah, we've got basic training programs out there,
Mhm.
but what do we have to train our officers for that first step up the ladder?
Mhm.
And you guys in New York State have had that first line supervisors training program for
Yep.
a long time now.
Mhm.
You want to dive in on that a little?
Sure. FDNY runs it, and most of the newly promoted officers around in the counties north of the city, north and west of the city, go to that, and you know, maybe they were, you know, super great line fireman, engine company guy, and now they have to do planning, and now they have to get guys to do their physical fitness and truck maintenance, and that basic supervisory program teaches them how to do that, and then it really paves the way for success for that company. And if the company's successful, the battalion's successful. If the battalion's successful, the department's successful. And
Yeah.
all your bullets, Jeff, on the bottom, they're you know, they're like, hey, we're doing really good because we've trained to get there, you know, not just said, all right, Schmedley, you're a lieutenant now, good luck. You know, it's like, you know, the poor guy's going to do the best he can, but if he doesn't know, he doesn't know, you know.
Jerry, how long is that class?
You know, I don't know, John. I know it's several, I want to say it's a couple of months full time, but I mean, anything is better than nothing. Just saying, hey, Lieutenant, good luck. You know, I mean, it just doesn't work that way. You know, again, I worked for the Army forever, and it was so easy to be successful because it was kind of a pain in the ass on one hand because it was like a way to do everything. You know, it's like, here's how you write a letter. Well, you just follow the format, fill in the blanks, and you got a perfect letter or you got a perfect operations order, you know. So the plan was there, and we need to think about kind of doing the same thing, you know. Well, Jeff talked about SOPs, you know, on the fire ground. So
Where was it? That captain that we met from Boston. Yes, Boston up in Denver. They were planning a new officer development course and was actually asking Shupe about some high-rise stuff. And they had like a week-long process. They were going to pay all the new officers overtime for the week. They were off the line, and they were basically getting a I think it was 1 week or 2 week course on how to be an officer and everything that you had to do. And I thought that was really cool that they were actually devoting that time to them.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like something that is real popular around the country. I mean, I can't really think of any officer development for line officers here that covers the region. Now there's some different state-funded initiatives. This Ohio Fire Academy has outreach programs, and there's even Ohio Fire Executive Program. But the issue is in this side of the world, you know, we have so many smaller entity fire departments, 1-2 station departments, that it really is left to in-house training, and that seems to be the lion's share of training company officers. You know, this is what this fire chief likes, so that's kind of what you do, and and it goes from there.
FDNY has done some really great things. They've reached out to, like, they have for their senior leadership, they send them to the Naval Postgraduate School. It's in Pennsylvania. So they've, you know, reached out to these leadership building institutions and done that. They partnered with the military academy at West Point for their counterterrorism program. West Point had a huge counterterrorism program after 9/11. And FDNY partnered with them, and it was a great partnership. I don't even think there was any money, you know, exchanged. I don't think it cost because it benefited both groups, you know. So I think maybe some of the fire departments, Jeff, that you talk about can reach out to their maybe count. I know my county has I forget what they call it, Leadership Rockland, where they develop young leaders. So maybe that would be a place to look for help at your county or state governments, you know.
Yeah, I have to look at it. All right, Jeff, you want to click through a couple more?
Yeah, let's go through. Okay, company officer challenges. Company officers responsible for efficient service delivery, which, yep, exactly. Once again, it comes right down to the company officer, how they perform. Company officer must allocate resources effectively. How does an engine company officer determine who's going to be the apparatus operator? Is it going to be by seniority? Are we going to rotate people through, so when that senior man is off, you've got somebody able to step up and drive and operate the apparatus effectively? Chad, you got a situation where you guys are apparatus operator engineers or something like that. You're certified or something like that?
Yeah. So the state of Texas, you know, I guess there's a, you know, you have your firefighter cert, there's your driver operator cert that you go through a class 4 through them. There's an aerial operator cert to just drive an aerial. The way we do it in Addison is the engineer is it's a paid position above firefighter. So like, you know, I just got a new driver when I promoted. So him and I are both learning this as we go. But what we do is we take the guys that took the test and didn't get promoted. So if they're on a list, if that guy is available on my shift, because I have one, he's the one that's always going to drive when my driver's away. And that way, you know, he gets to start preparing for the next role, and then, you know, he gets better prepared, so the next time he tests, he's more confident. And I have a dedicated driver. We do let everybody drive, you know, because everybody needs to learn how to do it. But, you know, hey, your first time pumping doesn't need to be on a fire. It needs to be on at the training facility, you know, and we need to practice before we actually put you on the streets and do it. And so, you know, if this is as simple as, hey, we're letting our 1 year, 2 year guys drive to the store and back just to get them used to driving. But yeah, we have a pretty formal, you know, the rank you make it on the list, if you're waiting to promote, that's who's driving when the driver's gone.
Okay. How do you guys do that, Jer? In your company?
Well, there's 26 departments in my county here, and it varies. What I think we should be looking at is three simple things: task, condition, and standard. What do we want that driver to do, under what conditions, and how fast do we want them to do it? So, you know, like Chad says, you got to give this guy wheel time and that kind of stuff. But when it comes to test time, you know, we want them to hook up to a hydrant with a soft suctioner or whatever it might be, you know, in 2 minutes or less. And of course, within that standard is, you know, did he put it in pump gear? Did he put the air brake on? Did he chock the wheel, or whatever you guys think is important? So task, condition, and standard. It really riles me up when I hear so, you know, so, oh, Jerry's not ready to drive yet. Okay, well, when's he ready? You know, and then, you know, kind of on the other side, we get guys from FDNY that have been through their chauffeur school, and we're like, oh, no, he's not ready to drive our truck yet. Well, the guy, you know, if he knows what the task is, and he knows what the conditions are, and he knows what the standard is, with a little practice and review, he could probably do that in an hour, you know, if he's been through, you know, a major department chauffeur school. So task, condition, and standard, I think, is what's really important.
Jerry, the most important task you mentioned would be setting the air brake.
Could be.
That's always
Whatever.
First step.
Drive, stop.
So you're not into the pump and drive thing, Chad?
We don't do that pump and drive.
No, pump and roll, maybe?
No, we don't do that pump and roll.
Pump and cruise? No.
Okay. All right. Okay. So yeah, identify your resources and how to effectively use them. The resources being personnel, and like what we're talking about here, and so forth. Needs of the company must be identified. What do you want your engine company to be able to do? And this is something, sometimes it comes from within the company, keeps the guys thinking, you know, gives the guys initiative. Sometimes it comes from upstairs, you know, meaning the Golden Dome. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I could see, you know, where the needs of the company, as it says, need to be identified. And then of course there's that communication thing again, you know, how do you communicate that onward and so forth. So inadequate resources and overwhelming needs create great challenges for the company officer. Absolutely. You know, and again, picture the guy, we all know he's a fireman on the back step today, and he's in the officer's seat the next day, and he runs up and he's got a multiple alarm fire in his hands and he's first due. So the other thing is, continuing on, the company officer must establish priorities within the company, within the firehouse, what we do in the firehouse, how we do things like that. And of course, you know, how the company is expected, what are our priorities on the fire ground. And last thing is individual and group needs. So how are we doing so far?
Good. We're at about an hour, Jeff. So let's do one or two more. Okay.
Okay. All right. So here's something right here. Decision making. Okay. Again, a decision is a choice made between two or more alternative options. A, if there's no choice regarding what you do, no decision is required. B, if you have a choice, you need to make a decision. As you know, you take a look at what has been put out there on the internet. And I'm going to throw this, I I probably shouldn't even do it, but I'm going to throw it out there. What does an engine do in this scenario? Well, again, it should come down to the company officer, not firemen living in nowhere or someplace like that, getting online and giving their 2 cents. And in a lot of cases, when you look into these guys' background or you vet them, you find out these guys only have a couple of fires under their belt. They've never been in that position to make a decision before, and that they're telling the fire service and the fire service world what they think should be done, especially on a critical decision where life is involved and so forth. So that's the thing about being in that right front seat. Mr. Mateer is now doing that when he's out in the field making all that overtime. Finds himself in that position. So
Somebody's got to do it, Jeff. You retired, so it's up to us.
So, but again, like we say here, if there's no choice regarding what you do, no decision is required. Okay, don't worry about it. But if you have, what do we do? Well, what are the conditions? And that's the whole thing about the boss. In our class, and I put up that one slide about the front of the house is rolling to beat hell. And I tell the people, when you turn into the block and you see this, you slow down your engine. And that's the officer who's got to make sure that driver, engineer slows that engine down, because now you're going to start looking at things. Yeah, it's a big ball of fire at the end of the street, or it might be out in the middle of the street too, depending on how tight the streets are. What are you looking at? Are you looking at the environmental concern? Is the wind blowing the flames into the house next door? Is the smoke down to the street where you can't see what's going on? Are you looking for your hydrant? Is anybody out in the middle of the street screaming or whatever? Or is this just one of those interesting fires you pull up, a lot of excitement and nobody around? Or the power line's right down in front of the building because it burned through already and it's working. And so these are the decisions, that you have to make, but you got to say, okay, my decision is we're going to slow down. We're not coming to a stop, but we are slowing the apparatus down because we got to get our act in order here. And now the officer's got to make, okay, guys, this is an 1 3/4 job. Go to it. And again, if you train your company and train with them regularly on a daily basis and so forth, that's as simple as that. John, remember when we were together, how we would say, something like that, fog tips coming off because we had to break apart nozzles and we're going solid bore. Something that simple. And that's how it would work. Simple decision to make. This is what we're going to use because we got a lot of fire. We need a lot of water, from our stream, from our nozzle. So boom, done. That's simple. So again, sometimes an officer finds it hard to do. Well, that's what you're paid to do.
Yeah, that is. You're there to make decisions.
Yeah,
for sure.
Hey, boss, I think an important thing, especially, from my perspective as a new officer, it's important to admit when you make a bad decision too. That'll get you a long way when you say, yeah, guys, I screwed this one up. Sorry. Won't let it happen again. Take the blame. It's ultimately on you. So you might as well be on front of it. It's a lot easier to say, yeah, this is what I thought was happening, but I messed up.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with being human once in a while.
Because as I've learned, you're going to mess up a lot more than you think you are.
Yeah. Okay. Simple statement here. Decision-making is the process of deliberation, which leads to a final course of action. Sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's like, hold on a second. Have you guys ever been to a fire that's been a cluster and the chief has said, stop the job, everybody back out. Let's reassess this thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Instead of making decisions over and over and over again, in most cases, if you have a bad situation, the decision you make isn't going to make it better. That's why I know of an older chief who's been retired now for a number of years, but he was a great fireman and an excellent company officer too. And when he became a chief, he carried that with him. And him and I would talk, and he would say, yeah, I stopped the job here, got everybody out. And we just had to say, okay. and gave new assignments, and that was his decision. It worked out well. So it was obviously the right decision to make for that situation. So some people think, some command officers think we'll just keep throwing bodies at it. It's like the Chinese military. We got millions and millions of people. We'll just keep throwing them at the problem. No, that doesn't work in our job. So
Like if we got a dozen. All
yeah.
right.
Here's a decision right here. What do you do?
So you got
So-
3 homes right next to each other, separated by maybe a driveway or a sidewalk. That's it. 2.5 story wood frames,
Yeah.
finished attic living space for sure. And the one in the middle is fully
Gone.
involved. Looks like it's partially collapsed in the rear.
Right. Yep.
And
The
you
only
got,
thing is, I'm sorry. What?
I was just describing it. You got, looks like the wind's blowing from left to right. So you certainly have some exposure issues there. Where were you going with this on your presentation?
Again, this is that thing about your decision. What do we do with this? You're dead on in your assessment. The back of this joint's all collapsed in. It was completely involved, and you're talking wood frame. These are things that should have an impact on stream placement, water delivery, and things like that. Let me go to the next photo. That right there. So if you see where the whole side of that exposure to is just burnt, and it's burning up in the attic right now. So again, fire ground decisions have to be made to get this taken care of, and then get lines into that number 2 exposure right there. And you're gonna have the same problem with exposure number 4. So
Hey Jeff, on exposure 2, what are those? Are they little windows near the eave? Those little
Yeah.
square,
those are vents. Those are vents for your knee walls.
the void spaces there?
Yep.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
got a lot of places like that.
Gable wall vents. Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
never saw those. I've seen the gable obviously near the peak of the roof,
Mhm.
but so is that just like a slotted
Yeah.
louver or something?
That's what it is, right? Yeah, and it's air movement, so you got to think about that. If fire
Yeah.
can get in there, and it's all about the breathing and so forth of the structure. This was the old philosophy. Keep the air moving, so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's it. So if the fire gets in there, you can have fire running horizontally very, very easily. If you got
through-
open spaces.
Because that knee wall is going to be just to the
Sure.
toward. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But,
So here, let's go back there. So, yep. Command sequence. Here we go. Real quick, we'll run through this and then we'll kill it for tonight. What do you think?
All right, let's do it.
Okay. Think, plan, act. A logical thought process. This comes from your National Fire Academy MICDO classes. Okay. This command sequence, a logical thought process. Think, plan, act. In other words, keep it simple. Think about what you got, plan for it. Is it within the realm of your resources? Remember what your resources are, your personnel, your apparatus, and your equipment, and then act accordingly. If it's a big fire, deliver the water in a big way. That's pretty simple, don't you think? So,
Yeah.
And again, it's the engine that's responsible for that. Company officer, it's your job to make sure your guys do that accordingly. The decision-making process. And even though we're reading it here, define the problem, collect the information, generate alternatives, evaluate them, and so forth, and then select, it's happening like this in so many cases, right? And this is what time in the business, your knowledge, your background and experience allows you to do. I've seen some bosses, and again, we've all been to fires all over the place. And it was amazing and impressive to me to see some of the older bosses, they looked like they were looking here, looking there, looking at that and so forth. Well, that's what they were doing. But when they were coming up with a decision, it was like, yep, oh my God, this guy got everything figured out right there,
Yeah.
And I'm going to throw out the disclaimer. Not every boss in the past was that way, but you knew the good bosses, and I will always compliment those guys and respect those guys for what they showed they could do, because they were looking out for their people. They were looking out for their community. They were looking out for those buildings and the firefighters and so forth and so forth. And that's how they could handle those situations like that. So do you think?
I think it's a good place to wrap it up. I mean, it
Yeah.
looks like this class goes a little bit deeper into the command and control side of things, but I think we picked out a few things for the company officer that maybe people didn't really consider. That it's more than tactics and strategy. It's the firehouse. It's not only the firehouse now, but years down the road that you have to think about as a company officer. And when it comes to thinking about the firefighters that work for you and their future in the fire service, I mean, it all comes down to a good company officer will make or break a fire department. No doubt about it. So thanks for sharing that. One of these classes that you had from years back, it's still very applicable. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We'll
You
have
guys
to
want to
start
round it
training.
out for us here? Jerry, John, Chad, you guys want to?
Yeah, I just like what Jeff said about, you're pulling onto the block and the fire's blowing out in the street. I think a lot of guys are gonna be stepping on the gas instead of the brake. And that idea of stepping on the brake gives you time to do this.
Hey, how about
And
that one?
Yeah.
how about that? And Jeff talked about all the things that company officers should be thinking about tactically. And that idea of stepping on the brake, man, that's a cool idea.
Kind of goes against the grain, doesn't it, Jer?
Yeah, man, it's
Thanks.
fire. We got to go faster, not slower.
Yeah.
Oh, but a lot of things to think about.
Yeah. Hey, John, what do you think about this slide?
I seems vaguely familiar.
Remember, officers, it doesn't take a lot to be good. How good do you want your company or station to be?
Yeah, John, it's almost like you wrote John and Chad under
Yeah,
that.
that's what I was thinking as soon as I popped up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were starting to shake a little bit, weren't you? Or break out into a sweat.
No, just questioning your loyalty to us.
Oh, it's always there. It always will be.
Hey, real quick, boss, I wanted to congratulate you.
For what?
Well, I don't know if you know this, but you've been accepted to FDIC again this year.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
There you go.
So have you
Yeah.
guys. I wouldn't be there if it wasn't for you guys.
Huh.
Just
We can all say the
that
same.
Yeah, I know I wouldn't be there if it wasn't for you.
it's
Just business, Jeff.
thank you, Jer. It's just business. Thanks.
Just
That's
business.
right. Oh God. That's like pouring iodine on an open wound.
That quote will live forever and
God.
needs to
bless
stay with
America.
us.
Wow.
So for anybody watching that's going to FDIC, please take our class. I guarantee it'll be the best 8 hours you've had in a long time on a for a class.
For hands-on engine work. For
And we're going to
hands-on
turn
engine
Jeff loose again.
That's right.
Yep. So,
Well, again, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We appreciate your time. Remember, you can always reach out to us through our website and stay tuned for the next edition of Firefighting Fridays. We'll keep it going. You keep tuning in.
Yep.
Jeff, you got anything?
no, I'm cool.
All right. Jerry,
I'm good. I said
Chad?
more than enough.
John?
Y'all
Nope.
be safe.
Oh, see, this was easy, huh?
Yeah.
Take care, guys.
All right. Have a good night, folks.